All right, Sunday. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. It'll be kind of a strange one because there's two of us in here tonight, Glenn and myself. So the interesting thing, so Steve is home this weekend with his family, which is certainly understandable. I do support him spending time with his family. It's extremely important to them, because he's on the road all the time as a trucker. So if he gets to be home, then that totally makes sense that he would devote that time to them, and I respect that totally. And then also, I don't know where Matthias is. Generally, he sometimes is a little bit late on Sundays, which is certainly understandable because he's busy all day with getting the Sunday school and the church service for Liberty, which he's involved in, and then also on Sin City Preacher's channel with Church of the Eternally Secure. I did listen to some of that, and then so he was over there. So he might pop in a little bit. I also invited Esteban from Melted Zone, sent him the link. He was on last week. So didn't get a response back from him, but totally understandable. And so as I said, it's just Glenn and myself. So we do have a topic for tonight, which we will just go through it and see what happens. That's kind of the plan. So tonight's topic is Get Lucky. We've come too far. And I'll go over that in just a minute. Hello to Hendrix. Hendrix, Glenn was talking about before the show. We didn't even know who would show up. A lot of times what happens is if you take a week off, people can forget that the show's even on. So, Hendrix, you want to come on the panel? We can send you the link. It'll just be us three guys talking about this subject. That'd be hilarious. Oh my goodness. Well, so normally I would say wait to the 10-minute mark, fast forward through the first 10 minutes of introducing the panel and going a little bit back and forth. But tonight, since it's just the two of us, we're just going to start it off. So I'll go over the description, and Glenn and I will just have a conversation, just like we do many times over Messenger. And gosh, how long has it been, Glenn, since we had started having conversations? It's been a little over 2 years, I think.
Yeah, just over 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't seem to have any problem talking about stuff. It's just not usually live. It's all private stuff,
I knew Australia was underpopulated, but didn't think the USA was.
That's right. No doubt. No doubt. Well, Glenn, I appreciate you being here tonight. And Glenn does these write-ups for the show. And normally when we have a panel, Glenn represents, and I don't even like calling him this anymore, really, because it just seems so out of place. And when we started it out on Blog Talk, what did we call it then? Ask an Atheist or something? I think that was the original title.
What? How'd you remember that? I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
Oh gosh, I have a huge memory warehouse, and so far it still works. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to worry about that later, not being able to remember stuff. But Ask an Atheist, I think we titled it, and it was the same kind of setup. We had a board of quote unquote believers, and then we would just kind of ask questions and have a conversation like that. And then as that continued, it became tedious to me to use that term because I don't think it's absolutely accurate. But then we just kind of dropped that, and then Glenn just naturally evolved into being involved in picking the topics, and then you would write them up, and we would talk about whether this would work or that would work, and then we would have a panel just kind of walk through things. Hendrix says, "Ask an Atheist, not catchy enough." Well, Hendrix, man, maybe you should get involved with the picking the names for stuff. That'd be awesome. All right. So I'll go over the description and we'll get started. So back after Easter with a smile. Okay, tonight's song has suggestive lyrics, but inspiration comes from many places, and we just have to trust that process. The song is Get Lucky by Chic. It's really about the first few minutes of the video and the song intro. Watch and you'll see all three words resonating from tonight's adventure: luck, privilege, and success. And we did post the link, so if you have a minute, definitely go over and watch that. And from the lyrics, it says, "We've come too far to give up who we are." There's another option. There's a choice, Maybe we've come too far to not give up who we are and become something new. Is that too deep? Whether we are 20, 40, 60, or 80 years of age, we're obviously living. But are we invested enough in life to say we are lucky, privileged, and successful? Perhaps only one or two of those words rings a bell. Perhaps none. Some quotes: luck is believing you're lucky. That's Tennessee Williams. What separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude. Brene Brown. Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom. George S. Patton. Each one of us sees each of these words differently and collectively. We all apply different interpretations and standards. Let's see what is important to you. What does luck mean to you? Do you believe in luck? What does privilege mean to you? Do you consider yourself privileged? What does success mean to you? Do you consider yourself successful? Remember, perceptions can change in an instant. A medical diagnosis, an accident. The group would say getting saved, meeting someone special, or just a simple reworking of the things we consider important. Ask Nile Rodgers. He might say, I'm lucky to be alive, privileged. I have money to pay for surgery, and blessed that surgery was successful. Just a thought. In life, we, the collective, admire and adore those who consider those we consider lucky, privileged, and successful. Why might that be? What's the real bottom line? Do we wish for a change in circumstances or a change within? First two lines of the song are, like the legend of the phoenix, all ends with beginnings. Which leads to an intriguing question. In this life, do some of us constantly die and then arise from the metaphorical ashes? Is this what happens every time we throw ourselves open to a new idea, investigate a thought, maybe even have a new scriptural revelation? Is change about beginning or an end? Under God's umbrella, is change encouraged or feared? Is anything off limits? That's the hidden theme in tonight's show. What we think is real is often an illusion, and what we see as an illusion is often real. The bottom line is always the same. Whether you are a believer or not, at some point you realize luck, privilege, and success are irrelevant. Wow, fantastic. First of all, the first thing I want to say is it seems like a shame that there's not more opinions to brains to pick on this one, Glenn, because there are some really good questions here and some things that are interesting. I guess first I'll say you began this out back after Easter with a smile, and that means a lot to me. I had a wonderful Easter and a wonderful birthday, and all of that went swimmingly, and we're moving right on into spring, and the weather's overall's been fairly nice, and so I do have a smile, and there's lots of things in my life to smile about, and we'll get to whether I feel lucky or not as the topic opens up a little bit. But talk a little bit, Glenn, about your smile after Easter, after the week off.
I think it's the same smile always. I wake up and if I feel healthy, I'm going to smile. It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah.
I don't need much to make me feel happy, if you want to use that word.
Sure, sure.
So,
I like how in the next part, when you're talking about the different ages, you used increments of 20 and 20, 40, 60, skipped right over 50. So I
I
appreciate
had
that.
to do that because I thought you're really towards 60 now. See, that's the deal. You're getting
Yeah,
closer to my age.
I'm, I'm on the other side of, yeah, I'm on the other side going up. Oh
And
my
we
God.
round up, not round down.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the quotes, luck is believing you're lucky, Tennessee Williams. I don't know if anyone knows, but I'm a theater major. So I was actually in Summer and Smoke, which was Tennessee Williams' play. Actually was part of a couple plays by him. I think Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was another one. And so I'm familiar with his work, and that makes sense. Luck is believing you're lucky. Not sure how true it is, but it's an interesting quote. We use Brené Brown a lot. So her quote was, "What separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude." Picking that apart a little bit, I would agree completely. Of course, she spends a lot of time on privilege, and I do not agree with um, the overall the idea that if you're a Caucasian person in America, then you have entitlement and privilege automatically just by the very nature of being in that, being born with that skin tone and being born in America. Then automatically means that you have an attitude of privilege. I've never felt that way. What's that like in Australia, Glenn, as far as privilege is concerned?
No, I don't think so at all. I've never. Uh, um, I think it's very publicised, the divide, if you want to call it the racial divide or the
Hmm.
privilege divide, or
Hmm.
from the states. But although we have an Indigenous issue, it's not. It does not feel to me like it's in related to the word privilege. I think it's more. To be honest with you, it's more like it's people don't know how to handle the situation.
Right.
I
No, they
think they.
don't.
I wish they think. I'm sure they wish they. I'm sure they wish they had answers, but they don't, because you
No.
can't impose the values of what we think are standards with the
Hmm.
values of someone who doesn't, who has a different perspective.
Right.
And so I don't think it's as divisive. One thing that's happened here dramatically in the last few years, which has been in the States for what I imagine is a very long time, is the Indigenous sports people are becoming way more involved in community, and that's having a big effect, very influential upon the children,
Right.
which is really good to see. It's amazing,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, yeah, really good role models.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
that's a real positive.
One of the things Hendricks said, I think it's a good comment. All male Caucasians obviously need to be enslaved for reparations. LOL. He's saying that as a joke, but that's one of the problems that you mentioned, Glenn, is the attitude of the other side. And if you ask them the questions, do you think that the people nowadays, for everything that's been done to African American people and all the things that surround that, should pay reparations? A lot of them believe that they should have that attitude, that they're entitled to repayment, even though there's not a single living slave owner from that period of time that it's around anymore. So there's not anyone in America, at least, who legally owned a slave. Um, but yet that attitude is pervasive. And then so you have the extreme on the other side. You have racism in America, and the topic isn't going to stay here on this particular topic, but it's just interesting to me from the comment. You have racism, and it is pervasive in a lot of areas, especially in the Deep South, which I've spent a lot of my life in the Mid South. I would consider South Carolina and North Carolina to be in the Mid South, and then Below that, of course, Georgia, Alabama, and places like that, which are considered southern states. And of course, Alabama is notorious for that, for racism, pretty widespread. So either way, this comment is interesting. The quote, and then the last quote: "Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom." From George S. Patton. My grandfather worked under Patton in the Battle of the Bulge, and he did not like him at all, but he respected him. He respected him, and it would be hard not to respect a man like that, based if you're looking at your appreciation or admiration of him due to his military exploits. Then that would make some sense. But the quote itself is a good one. Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom. That's assuming that everyone's going to hit bottom or everyone else is going to fail. And I think there's some truth to that, and success being part of how many times you failed in order to be successful. And that's certainly true about inventors and things like that, that all talk about all their failures, how many number of times they failed. It's true about politics and how many times people ran for public office. Specifically Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and talked about, I think he failed 16 or 17 times before he was ever president. And that's a lot of times to try something out and fail. Businesses fail. You start a business and fail. How many times does it take you to learn from your mistakes? And for me, it's true in relationships. I went through a divorce, and I learned a lot from it. I know I learned a lot. So did I have to go through that failure in order to eventually be successful? I mean, it's a question that's still open for interpretation, at least on my part. But success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom. What do you have anything to comment on that, Glenn?
Sorry, that's my laptop. I've got two computers.
That's all right.
I haven't got my mouse on my laptop. The first thing is that I think, and you and I had this conversation about this, been really nearly 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think I said to you that, is there really such a thing as failure?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that, because this is, I remember that conversation.
Yeah, so do I, because it's like if you how do I'm just trying to think how that went.
Well, I remember, if you want me to.
No, please take it.
Yeah. So I was complaining, if I remember correctly. I was complaining a little bit and talking about failure, and you were reacting to the word failure, and you were saying, and this is a paraphrase, but you're saying that you didn't believe in using that word. Everything that you do, whether failures or success, is part of the process and shouldn't be looked at as an ending of something. It shouldn't be looked at as failure, but it should be incorporated into an overall attitude where you're moving towards something rather than being defeated. Is that close?
That's correct. Well, it's like if you don't pass an exam, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. It's just you didn't pass that exam. You can have another go.
Right.
As soon as you mindset yourself towards success or failure, I think everything starts to get distorted. It's just living a journey.
Yeah, it is a journey. So I've changed, and guys, people can change in this life. I have always believed that, even if it doesn't seem obvious from the way that the world is, the condition of the world, and the way people treat each other. I have seen people change. I have felt change in my own life, and it is possible. I would say that 2 years ago, I was learning that little bit about failure. Now, to me, the word still is meaningful. It's still, you did fail that time, but I've changed the way that I look at it overall. I wouldn't continue to stay in that place. To use your analogy, if I failed a test, and that literally is, getting an F. You get an F on a test, you failed it. You did fail that test. You did. But as you said, you can have another go at it. So you move on. This would be my choice, is to call it what it is, but then not stay in that place and move forward, move toward the second testing and start preparing for what's next. But I think it means a lot more in real life to not use that. Don't say I failed at something, especially in life, because you do have another shot. While we still breathe, while we still wake up and our heart's still beating, we have a chance to do things better. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's always a bigger picture. Do you mind if I just use your mum as an example of this?
I do not.
Okay. Well, as people know, your mum and I had a relationship, but we didn't end up together. But you can't say that's a failure, because I'm here now speaking with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if people take that failure to heart and they just cut people out,
Yeah.
because they didn't get what they want,
Yeah.
it's a big difference from allowing everything to still remain open
Yeah.
to possibility, even if they don't comprehend that there is actually a possibility at all. If that's not, does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. Well, it especially makes sense to me because there was a moment, over 2 years ago when my mom died, that a decision could have been made to just not move forward, and I could have just said, I mean, what is there of value in this for me? But they're not seeing the value that would come out of it by making a different decision, which was to be open to someone that knew my mom, not knowing how it was going to work out, but even coming from a place of having been betrayed enough, and friends stabbing me in the back and things like that. So even in my case, from a lack of trust based on experience, to say, you know what, I don't know why, but I feel open to this for some reason, and paying attention to that, and all the benefits coming out of that, making that decision to be open to something.
Yeah. And I think if you hadn't been open, we wouldn't be on True Story Live.
No, True Story Live wouldn't happen, and
Here at all.
no, you're that's completely true. I mean, and I can detail probably 100 different other reasons of things that I've learned from this relationship, and things that great joys that have come out of it for me, that wouldn't have come otherwise. Yeah. So being open in general, and and I've mentioned this before, but my very icon is an open sign, and that is still a big part of my life, and trying to be an open person, be open and authentic, and we've talked about that before. And it is something that later in life, learning this and understanding what it is, and doing it, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk in that, has changed everything for me. And to me, you can't go back once you learn a lesson like this. Once you realize that by staying open, you avail yourself to a great number of experiences, that if you're closed off and isolating and saying, you know what, relationships are too painful. I've been through too much. Too many things have happened. I'm not going to risk it anymore. I'm going to close off my heart. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to make my own little security fences and barbed wire on the top, and I'm going to keep people out so that I don't hurt anymore. And people do that. People can do that, especially from other broken relationships, a divorce or breakup of some sort, or someone that you love dies, and you might just say, I'm done. And if you do that, though, then you're closing yourself off from other experiences that could change everything for you. Could change your perspective, and could change your life. Any comments?
Yeah. So is your divorce now perceived by you as a failed marriage, or what?
Well, yeah, it was a failed marriage. That's exactly what it was. But I don't look at the whole thing as a failure, because I learned from it, and it strengthened me and made me a better person, and made me focus more on the things that needed work in my life. It was a failed. I mean, that's the fact of it, right? It was a failed marriage. It 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 wasn't successful.
Yeah, but this is where I have a problem with
Mhm.
the word failure, because it it is failure about the fact that two people couldn't actually just get live together.
Well, okay. So if you this is interesting. So if you look at marriage, your statement was your marriage a failure, right? It was. If the goal was to be married and stay married, then it didn't work. We didn't stay married. So that part, just by the very nature of the definition, was a failure.
Okay, so if your goal was to stay married rather than just be married, do you think that contributed to the breakup?
Oh no, no. I know my original goal was to stay married and be married. That was the goal. But what I discovered was that there were some blocks that she put up, not me, but she put up, that made it difficult to be married. So it was more dutiful. It was more of a dutiful marriage on my part rather than it was being married. And yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways it played a factor. But see, I still would have been willing to be in a marriage. That wasn't my choice not to do that. Um, you can't force another person to be in a marriage, to stay married either. It has to be two people that are on the same page, in my opinion, that willingly want to be. I like that term though, Glenn, to be in the marriage. Being engaged, being open, being authentic, being tied together, as I thought marriage would be. That was my interpretation going into it, was that we're going to be close, we're going to be tied to each other, we're going to be one person, and that was not my experience with that one.
So how high have you bounced from the bottom? Gotcha.
You sure did. You sure did.
That's an in joke, guys.
Well, gosh, I will say it like this. I will say that about as far back up as you can imagine coming. Um, that was one of the lowest times in my life. The aftermath of the divorce, because I put a lot of stock in it. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. That's what I did with that marriage. And so, since I didn't have anything to do with the choice to break up the marriage, and there was no recourse for me to do anything to save it or make it better, or counseling or anything, there were no options on the table. Yeah, I felt like it was something that happened to me rather than something that I had any involvement in. So I was left to kind of pick up my own pieces as a result of that, and it was a low time. I mean, it was probably the most devastating thing that I've ever dealt with. I haven't had anything happen to me that took longer for me to get past and get out of. It was a deep pit, metaphorically speaking. It was a deep pit emotionally, and um, yeah. So to be where I am now, I would say, if you look at that as a pit that I was in, and I'm out of the pit now, and I spent a long time out of the pit, but still kind of hanging around the outside of it, not sure what to do, not sure where to go or how to rebuild anything. But what I noticed was, when I stopped worrying about what was coming next and just focus on the now, then little by little, I started to see I was moving further and further away from the pit altogether. and I would say now I'm on the high ground in some ways. So I would say that's a fairly long way.
Okay. I just noticed that Brenda put something in here. God has been stretching me immensely with my kids, but it's good. And I just wonder if Brenda would care to draw a line or draw the or association between what God's been doing and her perception of whether she had been failing or succeeding with her kids.
Okay, so your question for Brenda is draw the line between where she's succeeding and where she's failing with the kids. That's the question.
How does God fit into that picture?
Yeah, how does God fit in that picture? Okay, Brenda, if you can hear me, try to answer that question for us. That'd be awesome. We can talk a little bit more about that. Excuse me. So while we're waiting on that, we have a couple questions we could go through. We can always go back to this too because it's an interesting topic, and further down in the Brenda's thinking about the answer to the question, so we'll come back to that. Further down in the description, there's more about the success
Sure.
and stuff. So the first question is, what does luck mean to you? And the second question, they kind of tie together. Do you believe in luck? So I'll answer first since you wrote the question, and then you can fill in some things, Glenn, if you so choose. What does luck mean to you? Luck is a term used. Luck itself, I don't actually believe in luck. I believe in odds. And this is something I learned in university in a math class when the instructor was talking about this very topic and talking about luck. And she actually did a demonstration with a pair of dice, and she cast dice several times and was talking about how there's no such thing as luck. It's just the odds that it'll land on a certain number or that certain number or whatever. So in learning that, at least not everyone perceives luck as a real thing. The odds are a real thing. The way things come about in a place where you believe that there's a God, which I do, makes it seem like it's not luck, but odds. But I like the term luck. I like the term lucky. I say I'm lucky. Now, what it is for me is really blessed, but lucky it's a fun word. It's fun to say. It's fun when something happens and someone says, "Boy, you're lucky." I would have considered myself in the past. I would have said I'm unlucky. I would see other people win things, and I did a bit of gambling about 20 years ago, and I was lucky the first time, and that was a problem for me because I was so lucky that I thought that this is something I could do over and over again. It was a repeat performance thing, and I got into some trouble with that, with the gambling. People do the horse races, and you can comment on this, Glenn. People bet on horses. Is it luck that a horse that you choose happens to come in? I mean, people are certainly willing to plop money down on that. Or is it luck that the team that you choose, that you put money down on, that they win a game? I mean, you base it on a lot of things: how strong the team is, what you feel, how you feel the players are going to do, and a lot of work goes into that. But at the end of the day, it's just you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. So luck is a fun word. I don't believe that it's real. I feel like it's odds. It's the odds of things happening, something happening one way or another. I do like using the term. Do I believe in luck? No. I believe in that there is a structured pattern to things, and you can find that pattern. And if you do, oftentimes things happen in a more structured way. But then when something bad happens, then what causes that? Is it just bad luck, quote unquote, or is it the odds of something happening? And I'll use one quick, for instance. I drive a lot, and it was my business. It was, I mean, I would do it for my job. And the first 2 years that I drove for Uber and Lyft. For those of you that don't know, they're outside of the United States. Well, of course, it's everywhere, but most people probably know what it is. But you drive your own vehicle and pick people up. So in the first 2 years that I did this, the first accident I got in totaled my vehicle, and I had to get a new vehicle. Someone else hit me. And then the second year I did it, it didn't total my vehicle, but someone T-boned me and ran on the side, and I had to have my whole door replaced and some of the quarter panel on the new van that I got. So 2 accidents in 2 years, where before the last accident I had been like, I don't know, like 12 years before, and it was a very minor thing. So the odds of me getting into an accident because I'm driving more, I'm driving every day, sometimes, 11, 12 hours a day at that time. The incidents of possibly getting in an accident go way up, where compared to you, Glenn, you know, that you probably don't drive as much as that. Any comment?
Yeah. No, I live in a small town. I certainly don't drive that far. I can walk to the shop in 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, okay, if I own a racehorse and it's in against a big favourite, and I don't think it can beat the favourite, but it's against it anyway, and the favourite stays in the barrier, and my horse wins, well, people are going to say, "Oh, gee, you were lucky."
Yeah.
I'd say, "Oh, you. Oh, that's great luck." And
Yeah.
it's probably the word luck is probably used in a way to equal fortunate.
Right.
But I
Okay.
don't think there's luck per se. I think it's just circumstances sometimes make it
Hmm.
appear that you've had a bit of a lucky situation, and it works in reverse. Sometimes your horse stays in the barrier, and
Hmm.
then you're up the creek.
You sure are.
Having owned horses, a lot of them, that's
Yeah.
what can happen.
Yeah. No doubt. I like that idea, though. I'm fascinated by horse racing. It's a beautiful sport, and horses are beautiful animals. Um, I've never put a bet on a horse or anything like that. I know that you do and get some enjoyment out of that, so that's fun. But I like the idea of the horse staying in the stall, and then you know, you're out of luck, so to speak, if they stay in there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I grew up with racehorses, and I've been with them my whole life. So whether it be betting on them, breeding them, buying them,
Mhm.
importing them,
Yeah,
or etc. You know,
fantastic.
it's awesome. Come to Australia and we'll show you some real horses.
I will be coming to Australia. So we'll go back a little bit because Brenda did come up with an answer. She says, "True story live. I fail daily when it comes to parenting. I yell, get mad, try to control, etc. But I realize that doesn't work, and end up running to Christ, which is good. Good in the sense that it makes me not rely on myself to parent, but rely on God. And in the process of my failings, He changes me to be a more godly person." All right. Thank you, Brenda, for sharing and being willing to be so open. Glenn, you asked the question, so I'll let you respond.
Can you just put that in English for me, please?
She relies on God rather than parenting in her own humanness, or we use the word flesh. The yelling and the getting mad and the trying to control. I think even Brenda would probably say that that was from the flesh, not the spirit. And you've been around long enough to understand the difference between those two things, I'm sure.
Sure, sure.
So she's saying that as many times as she fails, what she does is she runs to Christ, uh, and then he he aids in that. He aids in the parenting part, uh, and it gets better.
So let me just get this straight. Brenda's not saying God does it. She's saying God's influence upon her changes her perspective, and then she'll adopt those different standards with parenting. Is that how
Right.
you understand it?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Brenda, for sharing that. Do you want to do anything with that, or do you want to continue on with where we
No,
were?
I was just trying to relate to how I would deal with it as without having a God.
Right.
No, I'd probably have my own mechanism and say, "Hey, you're out of order here. You better pull your head in, and this is not working."
Yeah.
I mean, there's an obvious set of ideas that you have when you come to parenting,
Hmm.
and if you've worked them all out through experience, what works best with your kids, then you've just got to take account of the fact that sometimes you lose it.
Yeah.
So it's really about the strategies to recover from when you do lose it.
Yeah.
So I think I obviously, from my point of view, I would do that without a God. I don't think a God would have any positive or negative influence in that sense because I'd be doing it, not God. So,
Yeah. 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 But you can understand from the perspective of someone that does believe in a God how that would make sense that
oh,
they.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I applaud any process that gets to better parenting or anything across life. It's got to be beneficial. If it works for Brenda, well, that's awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's so interesting that I mean you understand now probably by this time that you are a rare person to not believe in God, but to not be angry that other people do. And it shouldn't be that way. We should just be able to believe whatever we want, and then you don't get angry at other people because their beliefs don't match up. But there's this particular thing, and there seems to be a lot of people, predominantly more people, that they say, "Well, I don't believe in God," and then I say, "Okay, that's fine, but I do believe in God," and then they get angry. They get angry and upset that we believe in something. It's a different thing to think it's foolish, but it's all tied into them not wanting us to have the right to believe whatever we want. See, I support your right to not believe in God completely. That's your choice. Each one of us has a choice of what to believe or to not believe in anything. So it doesn't bother me that you don't believe. I don't spend 1 minute thinking, well, that Glenn, I can't believe that he doesn't believe in anything. Well, that jerk, I don't think like that. Um, we still get along just fine, even though our belief system is different, and it's proof positive that that can be a reality in this world. That people with different beliefs or non-existent beliefs with someone that does believe, that the two people can get along fine and not cause problems.
They call it lack of judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have a lack of judgment. I like it. Okay. The next question is, what does privilege mean to you? You consider yourself privileged? Privilege is a big word and means a few different things, but I think the way that you mean it, and before I answer, just let's make sure that I understand the way that you mean privilege. Privilege meaning, like I would say um, that I have more opportunities in living in the United States, and it's one of the richest countries in the world. Um, more access to jobs and clean water and a place to live and things like that than say other countries, India, parts of India or Africa. There are places that people struggle with starvation and getting clean water and things like that. Some of it's political, but I mean, there's a lot of other reasons why. A lot of places that are impoverished or third world countries that are not privileged. Is that kind of in the sense that you're talking about, just the amount of things that are available, or is it something else?
I think you're pretty close.
Okay.
I think it's when we lose sight of the fact that we've got so much, and then we just sort of start complaining about we don't have. And then when you compare with what you do have,
Hmm.
I think that's the whole basis of where you sit on the line of privilege.
Yeah.
What do you think is privilege? Are you happy with what you have compared with others, or are you, you know, disappointed because you don't have them what others do? It's yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you nailed it pretty well. Yep, for
Okay.
sure.
So to answer the question for me, it's changed. I've never really been a person that looks at other people and say, "Oh, I don't have what they have. I don't have this, and I don't have that." Um, and I'm not sure why. I've been around other people that have complained about, the 1%, and there are people in a place of power, and they seem to have all the money, where the rest of us, the 99%, are all struggling. Having to work two jobs, and not being able to go on vacation and things like that. Um, Honestly, it's the way it is. I mean, I can't do anything by complaining, so I generally choose not to. But I do know, if I look at myself in comparison, as I mentioned, to other countries, of course I'm privileged. Of course I am. Now, when it gets into Brené Brown's idea of privilege and kind of targeting Caucasian people, I happen to be Caucasian. I can't help that. I can't help that I was born in America. I was born to two parents that didn't have any money. I mean, they were young. They were in their early 20s when I was born, and they had nothing. And my dad was born to not dirt poor parents, but they were working class family. My grandfather, my dad's dad, worked well, some 50, 60 years of his life. He ended up, no, not 60 years. Let's see, would have been 40 some odd years. He ended up being retired, living longer being retired than he did the amount of time that he worked. But that's rare. People don't all live to be 94 years old. But anyway, so my dad came from a working class family, and my mom's family, they worked too. They were a little bit better off, I think, than my dad's family, but still middle class. Nothing more than that. So I didn't feel really privileged. My parents worked very hard for everything that they got. My dad worked, and then sometimes my mom had to work as well. I was taught to work. I had jobs really early on in life, where I saw some of my friends whose parents were more well off, and they didn't have to go get jobs. They were given lots of things. And then when I turned 16 and got a driver's license, my dad helped me get a truck, but I had to pay him for it. I had to make payments on the vehicle, and I had friends, and it was a beat up, well, not a beat up, but it was an old 1977 Ford F-150 pickup truck. And other guys that I went to school with were given BMWs. I mean, they weren't brand new BMWs, but it was a BMW compared to a pickup truck. And having conversations with them, they didn't make payments on it. They didn't have to even pay the insurance, but yet I would have to do that. So I didn't feel privileged. I felt like in the family that I was born into, you had to work for everything that you got. Now I'm grateful for that, because I there's no free lunch. I don't live in a place where I think that anybody's going to give me anything. I've never, and this isn't a bragging thing, but I've never had to go on food stamps or get money from the government or anything like that. No special programs, and I've struggled many times. Didn't know how I was going to pay for things. Um, so I grew up in a place where I did not feel privileged. But then it comes down to, well, what are you comparing it to then? If I'm comparing it to people that I grew up around, I'm not privileged. But if I compare it to people in India or in Africa or some other third world country, am I privileged? Absolutely, I am. But in the general sense, I don't feel privileged compared to people in America, knowing that there are always going to be someone that does worse than I do, and there's going to always be someone that does better than I do. But I don't walk around with an attitude of feeling very privileged. Glenn?
Yeah. Um, well, I have to say that Once upon a time, I thought I didn't have much. Then I started traveling the world. Boy, did I change my opinion real fast. You go and you see stuff that you just can't even believe exists, like going to other planets
Yeah.
on some of these places. And I won't detail some of the stuff to you because you're all going to throw up, but it does exist. And as soon as you go and do all that stuff, you realize, my goodness, I am so privileged. I've got everything,
Hmm.
So I think
You're saying compared to other places that you've been, is that what you mean?
I'm just comparing it. I'm saying that before I traveled,
Okay.
I didn't have a concept of what lack of, like, what I had compared with what I didn't.
Right.
Now I do. And
Okay.
boy, do I appreciate what's here.
Sure. Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Now I have traveled around America. I know we argue about this. Do you think that I don't know anything because I have only traveled within the bounds of this wide country that I know. And you may have a point in some ways, but I have seen uh, squalor. I've seen places and neighborhoods and things that are in disarray and wretched and torn down, and people actually still living there. But also, I've seen enough and heard enough and read enough about the reality of, in fact, just most of the tourist places, the places that people go and they win on Wheel of Fortune, and they go to these places, St. Lucia and some other places like that, where the resort, if you go there and stay on the resort, you're fine. But the people that live outside of the resort generally live in incredible poverty and have very little of anything. Does that kind of fit into what you've seen?
I've seen way worse than that, buddy.
Okay. Do you want to talk about a few of the examples or not?
Let's. Okay.
Well, you don't have to.
Well, no. I can. I'm just gauging in my head what I want to say on here because it's if people haven't had their lunch on it, their dinner. But
Okay.
let's just pick India for example.
Okay.
Now that's like going to another planet. Like I said, it's in another universe
Okay.
where if you get down and dirty, like, and get away from being in the Western hotel and actually get out there, it's like people, dogs, cows, all competing for the one shit pile.
Oh,
Have you
wow.
ever seen that and smelt it?
No.
And you can't imagine it. Nobody can.
Hmm.
And people can say, I've seen it on TV. Trust me, it's nothing like the real world.
Right.
It's out of this world. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you can keep your lunch down, you're lucky. If you've got a strong, I don't recommend those places if you haven't got a strong stomach.
Yeah.
It's just so way beyond what I ever believed people would ever live in.
Right.
People living on median strips on busy highways, trying to like it's about what 2 feet wide with a man, a guy and his wife and 3 kids,
Wow.
and they've got no food. They've got a little burner trying to cook a bit of bread. Stuff like this,
Wow.
you just can't comprehend it, and it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just one example. There are others, but I won't
Okay.
go on.
No, that's good enough. I think that paints enough of a picture for people to get an idea of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing I can say. I mean, about that. I haven't seen that, but I take your word for it that it exists. And of course, comparatively speaking, I am privileged in that way. I think it all depends on what the person thinks about their own situation that changes it for them. Even a person that was that grew up in privilege. It depends on their attitude that they have, of whether it's beneficial for them or not. On the other hand, there are people that grew up unprivileged, and they're wonderful, amazing people. And because of the attitude they have in their life, you would never know that they were struggling so much. All I know is, for me, I don't want to have an attitude of yeah, I'm privileged, but then you can go too far in the other direction and think, yeah, and start complaining about everything that you don't have. I don't think that's beneficial at all. Um, yeah. Okay. So the next part is, what does success mean to you? Do you consider yourself successful? This is a more fun one for me to talk about because of how much has changed. We did talk about this a little bit at the beginning of the show. Success is an ongoing process. The way I look at it now, success is an ongoing process rather than it is looking at individual moments in my life. Didn't always feel like that, but I do now. So success to me means continuing forward, moving forward. If I'm moving forward in my life, I'm growing and changing and continuing rather than just being in a rut and not growing, not changing, not moving forward, wallowing or staying stuck. Then to me, that is success. Every day that I breathe, every day that I wake up and have life, air in my lungs, and I'm able to move, then I am living in success as compared to other choices that I could make. So I do consider myself successful, and there are areas in my life where I would consider myself more successful in the moment than others. But I have learned from uh, considering things to be failures and change my perspective a little bit, because, as you pointed out earlier, like in taking a test, if you fail a test, you can take it again. There are some things in life that if you miss out on it, then there's no redos. There's no second chance. But I think that's a small list. I mean, like, I don't know. For instance, if you wanted to be an astronaut, I mean, that's a good topic for me to choose. But if you wanted to be an astronaut and you didn't fit the parameters by which they would, like, your eyesight isn't perfect, I think that's still a rule, then you wouldn't have an option to be an astronaut. Now, is that something that you failed because the way you were born, you didn't have proper eyesight, and they don't allow that? Or if you want to be president, and unless you're Obama and you're born outside of the United States, um, you can't be president. Uh, so I don't know if those are good examples or not, but there are certain things that you can't be successful at when you're gauging it because you don't have what's necessary to be successful in something. But my general attitude towards success is, as I described, is just moving forward. And if circumstances affect my life in some way and it's a struggle, I keep in the struggle and keep moving forward, because eventually it is going to change. It's going to be better. And Golgotha says, waking up is a huge success, he says. So he must at least agree with that part. Glenn?
Yeah. Well, I've changed so much over the years. Probably 20 mainly, but I would never have said this once, but I don't relate success at all to making money, achievements, anything like that.
Right.
I swam the fastest 50 meters in history in the pool, which would be impossible because I'd probably sink, but after 20 meters. But I consider if I had to relate success, I would relate it to relationships. If I have a great relationship with my kids and it works, I think that's how I equate success. That it's all just part of that sense of belonging, and if you're part of that community, you're successful at that. Like if you've got a great marriage,
Yeah.
I'd say that's successful. But you don't need you don't need, hopefully, you need money, but you don't need to equate success with, as I said, achievement, and that's my angle.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so we'll move forward. The next part is, in life, we, the collective, admire and adore those who consider lucky, those we consider lucky, privileged, and successful. Why might that be? So, since we just went over that, when we look at other people, why do we consider them successful? I think a lot of people are successful or privileged because they were born into it. Even some of the people that say when they're in an interview in Forbes magazine and they say, "Yeah, I did this, this, and this." Even Trump talks about himself as one of the most successful people in the world, but he was given money by his dad to start out his businesses. So and I'm not a political person anymore at all. So I just picked him because I've heard his story and heard him say how successful he is, and heard other people bring up the point that he didn't pull himself up by his own bootstraps, as Steve would say. He had privilege. He had things given to him, and the richest people in the world, they didn't make their millions. They were given it to them by their great grandpa, and they've kept money in the family, and so it was their turn to be the chairman of the board at the company. So they moved into privilege. They moved into it. Now, there are stories that I've heard of people that grew up in the poorest of the poorest of the poor and then ended up being successful, but that is not a common story. So the collective, we admire and adore those who we consider lucky, privileged, and successful. I think because it's in the fabric of everything we are, to uphold some of the things that you said, Glenn, that you don't consider, like people that have money or people that have a good job, and I don't either. People that have a lot of money and a great job, they could be complete total assholes. So, do I look at them as being successful? Maybe in some ways they are, but are they successful at life? How are their relationships? Are they kind to people? Do they do good things? Do they follow a certain, moral code of some sort? Those are the things I consider privileged. I consider people that are giving to others, and they're open to relationships, and they're empathetic, and they care about others. I look at those things, the personalities, and are you a good friend? Are you a good husband? Are you a good brother, etc.? I think those things I look at as more successful or lucky or privileged than some of the things that the world holds up. What do you think?
I think if you gauge success by the number of Instagram followers you're in big trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, any social media. Yeah. So how many friends you have on Facebook, how many likes or hearts or whatever. That was a good example though, Instagram. I have a fake Instagram account. And I like looking at some of the pictures and stuff on there, but I know nothing about how big that is, but I have heard that it is a pretty big deal, and that it's even more involved in the getting likes and stuff and subscribers than Facebook is, from what I understand. Instagram, I mean.
That's how I understand it. What Sandra was telling me, actually, the more followers you get money for it. I don't know how it works, but you see people who are on TV and
Yeah.
doing self promotion who've got thousands of followers,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of. And
Yeah.
who cares, for goodness sake?
Yeah, who cares? What does that translate into as far as proving that you're a success? Can someone have a bunch of followers and just be a total wreck in real life? I think they can.
I think if you take the veneer,
Yeah.
it's as fake as
Yeah.
having lip filler.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
like to make yourself look something you're not.
Yeah,
It's all an illusion. Like,
an illusion. Yeah, we're getting to that.
there we are.
I want to just really quickly say hello. We said hello to Brenda and Hendrix. I want to say hello to Alex. He's the real Alex, not the pretend one. And Stacy Ann in Arizona. Hello to you. And who else? Mike Elder, buddy. Good to see you. How are you? I hope you're doing all right. Journey's Wake. Thank you for joining us. It's kind of a small panel, just the two of us tonight, but we're tackling the topic anyway. So thank you guys for coming. I think a lot of people didn't know if we were coming on tonight or not, but here we are. So thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. Talk about success and failure. One of the things was this chair that I'm in squeaks, and I was given some WD-40 to spray on it, and I sprayed on it, and it made it better. But I cannot make it silent. I think in order to make it silent, I would have to take all the parts off of it and squirt every individual part in the chair in order to make it not squeak. But it's better. That's a throw-in comment right there.
Yeah, thanks. That was profound.
Yeah, thank you. You can tie it into real life there, Glenn.
You can. I've got a squeaky chair too. If you want.
I know you do. Yours is worse than mine was.
What did I put on it? Olive oil, I think. Lasted about 4 minutes.
4 minutes, and that must be the thing. The WD-40 it did cut down on it, but it doesn't get into all the parts internally. So that's the problem.
Yeah, now it smells in the room like Italy.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so we answered that question. Well, did you say whether you consider? No, yeah, you did. Yeah, we covered that. Okay, so the next, which leads to an intriguing question. In this life, do some of us constantly die and then arise from the metaphorical ashes? Yes. To me, I say yes. I say my first marriage was a death in it ending. I won't use the word failure just to keep it tight. But it did end. It was something that I thought would work and hoped that it would work. But now I find myself being glad that it didn't. But that's only after the fact. I didn't feel that then. There's no way I could have felt that. So it was, I have rose from the ashes, or I have arisen from the ashes, the metaphorical ashes, if you look at it that way. In physical terms, I've been getting healthier and working on my weight, and in that way, from where I was to where I am now, I would consider that a death of a sort, the death of the person that I was, all the weight that I was carrying around, and the shame that came with that for me, and how long that was a factor, and it kept me from doing things that are really part of who I am, and things that I wanted to do that I'm now able to do. And that's still ongoing, but I'm still working in that direction. So it's definitely a process, but there's a lot of examples I could use. And of course, if we had all the members of the panel, there would be people that talk about the spiritual side of that, which I can easily talk about, of how we die to our old self when we're believers, and our spirit is quickened by the Holy Spirit. He makes us alive. It's literally being called born again. So we die to ourselves, and we rise to who God wants us to be, from the ashes of who we had been, into what He's making us into. And I don't expect you to answer that part, Glenn. That's just for the people that would have been here, and they might have made that comment. So what about you, Glenn? Do you agree with your own question here? Do you feel like we die and arise?
Yeah, I do. I'll try to expand. I think it's essential, actually. I mean, some people might sort of quantify it or in those terms, but I think each time you have a something that you would consider to be certainly life changing, that usually is quite profound
Yeah.
because it's it's like you do die
Hmm.
because your reality changes. So I know I know it's metaphorical, but I think in order to move forward, you have to flick some of the garbage that was sitting out behind you.
Oh, absolutely. If if we use nature as an example, so you have a caterpillar that goes into cocoon, which is very painful, from what I understand from the people that have studied it, and they emerge as a butterfly, and that is a metamorphosis, but it's a death of the caterpillar and a coming to life of the butterfly. They're the same thing, but it becomes something different. So in that way, we see it in nature. It's not just a metaphorical thing. It's literally something that happens. Um, yeah. So that can happen in our lives in many ways. And again, using my marriage for an example, I did say it was a death, and there were parts of me that changed as a result of that and fell off, things I don't deal with anymore as a person that I would not have noticed had there not been the death of the marriage. There would be no way for me to have realized it unless I was in that place, that pit that I referred to. I learned in the pit. Uh, when you have a death like that in some way, or it could be a job that you worked at for a very, very long time, and then you get laid off or let go, and then you do something that you've always wanted to do and loved. I've heard stories about that. Someone works in a corporate situation, and all they want to do is build boats. They want to build boats and put their own varnish on it and sell them. And there's actually a story of a guy that did that. Worked and climbed the corporate ladder, and they let him go. And then he always wanted to build boats, and that's what he did. And now he makes millions of dollars. Um, he takes the time building handcrafted boats and sells them for a pretty penny. And people are the 1%. People love his work and end up buying them. So,
Okay, sorry, no, keep going, and then I'll ask you a question.
oh, I'm done. I just there was just an example of someone that thought their life was going one way. It was a death to the corporate job that he'd put so much of his time into, and then rising up in a different way to do something they love doing.
Okay, and this one sort of just popped into my head with respect to your relationship with God in this process. Is your has your relationship with God remained static throughout all of these, uh, let's call it transformations, or do you believe that with each death and rebirth, the relationship with God is actually changed and enhanced?
Changed and enhanced, absolutely, no doubt about it.
And why do you
Um,
say that?
well, I say it because if I'm looking at my own life and seeing the progress that's made, each of those deaths, I got a better sense of God being with me in the first place, where before I believed in him and I knew that he was there, but I didn't ever really need him that much. I was never in a place of death of anything. Uh, maybe in small ways, but not big enough to realize how instrumental he was in my life. And then so when you see that and realize that, then you can gauge how him being involved changes things. So in looking at all these different deaths that I've experienced and realizing he was there, and the amount of closeness I feel to him now as opposed to 20 years ago, for instance.
So you're saying God's more relevant because of these experiences?
Well, he's relevant regardless. He's relevant either way, but relevant to me, yes, absolutely, more relevant to me.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking on the run. So if I think of
Sure.
any more, I'll pop it up later.
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah. So you would agree then that there's a death and there's a rising, and this is a cyclical pattern.
I think it's which you mightn't label it as we've labelled it, but I think there is a turnover, transformation, a change, whatever label, as I said, you want to put on it. And I do think part dies, part does live. Yeah,
Well, on our bodies, we know that our skin cells die and then they're replaced constantly. Our cells die off. We lose our
yeah,
cells, our interior cells, and then they're being remade.
yeah.
So,
I
I
think.
mean,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that's okay. So it's just I was just going to add that it's a physical process where we see this death of one thing and then things being replaced and living in a different way.
Yeah, I just thinking about it right at this instant. Um, Maybe it's just that you become more aware, more tolerant, more understanding, more respectful. You just become a better person, and that plays out as part of the transformation or the rebirth.
Yeah,
What do you think?
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Um, and also, Patricia Randall made a comment relevant in every way because he is awesome. And she's talking about God. I would agree with you, Patricia. He is relevant, and I wanted to make that point clear that he's relevant regardless of whether I believe in him or not. He's relevant, but if I believe him and I have a relationship with him, what Glenn's saying is he becomes more relevant even in the death of things, um, becomes more alive to me. That's what I'm agreeing to, that he becomes more relevant to me as am aware of his involvement. And also, to use Glenn's point that you just made, I would agree that we become more compassionate and better people if we're in a place of being willing to understand that if something dies, there's something new that comes out of it. Certainly true with Mount St. Helens and the explosion. That's not the right word. Eruption of Mount St. Helens. And then I've seen these documentaries on this. It's absolutely fascinating. But that area around the volcano was decimated. I mean, trees, wiped out and all that. And when you see, you can actually look this up, guys, if you have any interest in doing that. Look up Mount St. Helens and look at some of the pictures and look at the growth that's there now. This also happens naturally. There are forest fires that happen and clear out certain parts of the forest. These are not the ones that are caused by man. It does serve the same purpose, but there are sometimes forest fires, whether it's a lightning strike or whatever happens, things get dry and whatever. But it decimates whole parts of forest, and then they grow back more lush than they were before. So that is literally life out of ashes. So we see this example in the world around us over and over and over again. And the Mount St. Helens thing is absolutely one of the best examples because there's been time since that eruption. I was a young person when that happened. And then so there's been enough time for things to grow. And you look at the pictures of that area now and see the before and after pictures, and it's more lush than it was before the eruption happened. So Hendrick says ash is great for plants growing. Yeah. So there's a reason for it. It's not like I'm saying it's some kind of magic thing. There's a reason for it. There's a pattern and a construction in the fabric of life itself that needs something to die in order for a new form to take place. And that it is metaphorical, but it's also a physical truth. It's a reality to me. It seems like it's a reality that things die and then something comes out of that. Life happens out of death. Certainly spiritually, we base our whole belief system on it. We believe that Christ died He died physically and rose again into a completely different existence. And we're promised the same thing when our life is over and this particular time frame is done, that we will be given new eternal bodies that last forever, and they don't die, they don't have disease, they don't fail, none of that. Jesus was the first fruits of that, and we're promised the same thing. But while we're in this realm, though, it is a shadow of what is to come, the death of something and life coming out of that. So it's everywhere. Seems like a great question, Glenn, with a lot in there to talk about for sure. Any more comments on that before we move on to the next one?
No, I think that's covered it.
Okay. Next one is this what happens every time we throw ourselves open to a new idea, investigate a thought, maybe even have a new scriptural revelation? That's a quick and easy answer. Yes, absolutely. Especially when it comes to scriptural revelation. And the scriptural revelation itself means nothing if the person doesn't apply it to their life. You can read something and understand it, but if you don't apply it to your life and actually walk it out, then it's just in your mind and doesn't affect anyone. It doesn't have any good positive effect on anything. So I think that scriptural revelation is an important thing, and even outside of Scripture. And you can respond more to this. Anytime, Glenn, that you investigate something, an idea, a thought, you dwell on it and use logic and use your own mental capacity to work out a problem. Is it like that for you? I mean, does that help you move into a different place in your own life?
Oh, that's a hard question. I'd have. Okay, well, my background is scientific, so I've been brought up with scientific method, but the reality of it is that I'd call myself intuitively scientific, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Is that I would trust what feels right more than and more than or enough to at least question the evidence if it doesn't feel right. So I'd say, tell me the question again.
Yeah. It's is this what happens every time we throw ourselves open to a new idea, investigate a thought, maybe even have a new scriptural revelation? The above question, the part about something being dead and then arising from metaphorical ashes.
Yeah, no doubt. I tend not to push it. Like if there's a new thought, I don't push it and try to direct it. I just have to let it hang out until something turns up, and then it may well be. Sorry, the cat jumped on my head. I got distracted.
That's okay.
He went berserk.
Golgotha has a question for you, Glenn. He says,
Sure.
Indigo Violet, how many times have we seen a bushfire and then the amazing way it recovers, Glenn?
Absolutely. Well, having worked in the university and all that with this kind of stuff, I'd say that it doesn't ever recover because it's an essential for germination. So with no fire, you get no new life.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Wow, you said fire. So God is called an all-consuming fire. He is a fire, and the fire that people will go through.
Hang on, I just have to answer the phone. Sorry.
Okay. I'll just continue. Just mute yourself there, Glenn, if you are able to do that. He's not muted. That's okay. So God is considered an all-consuming fire. So we believe that the fire of His Spirit cleanses us of anything in the end. So what will survive are precious stones. Anything that we do for Him, knowing that Jesus did everything, those things that survive the all-consuming fire will remain, and then everything else that's not part of that will die off. The wood, hay, and stubble. That's biblical premise by which believers live by. And there's even some people, and this isn't a topic we'll discuss here very often, but there are people that think that the lake of fire is actually a crucible of some sort, and that I wish Matthias was here for this part, but the idea of that even the lake of fire is a crucible, meaning people go in and all the parts are burned away. I'm sure it's very painful, but that what remains is anything that's left. But that's a topic for another channel at another time for sure. All right, so we discussed the metaphorical ashes, the rising up from there, and we discussed the next question. So the next one is change about a beginning or an end? Is change about a beginning or an end? And if you guys in the chat have any answers to that, put them up there while Glenn is on the phone, and we'll discuss it. Is change about a beginning or an end? For me, a change is generally both. It's both a beginning and an end. It's the beginning of something new that comes out of it, and it's an end of whatever it is. You know, again, my first marriage was an end of something, and then there were lots of beginnings that came out of it, and that's true about most things. I think if it's an end of one job, generally most people have to work. They're not. We don't all have our own bank account full of millions and millions of dollars, so we have to continue to work. So if we have a job and we lose that, or we change to something else, it's the end of one thing and the beginning of another. Relationships, same thing. It's the end of one relationship, the beginning of another. So yeah, to me, it's all both. Golgotha says both, and Hendrick says changes both. Thank you guys for cooperating. Hendrick says we change our minds in the context of that particular situation, ceasing from something and starting another because it is a better alternative. Change our minds in the context of that particular situation, ceasing from something, starting another because it is a better alternative. Stacy Ann in Arizona says, I say both as well. Thank you, Stacy Ann. We love you guys. You're awesome. Thank you for being a part of this tonight, even though it's a I don't think we've ever done a show where there's only two people on the panel. I don't think we've ever done that. No. So my answer, Glenn, was it's both. A change is about both a beginning and an end. And people in the chat seem to agree. What do you think?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll just move right past that one. That was a quick and easy one to answer. Next one is, under God's umbrella, is change encouraged or feared? Is anything off limits? Great question. Again, this would be great for an entire panel to answer, and we could stretch that out a little bit. But I'll answer first, and guys, if you want to answer in the chat room, I'm putting all your answers up regardless, so you can put them in there. Under God's umbrella, is change encouraged or feared? And then the follow-up question is anything off limits? Okay, under God's umbrella, change is encouraged. We're encouraged to change. He does the changing. We don't do the changing. That's where people get it confused. They think that they are the ones that do the changes. They think that you have to change yourself and come to Him. Come to Him pure and all changed, and then He'll accept you, which is the exact opposite. We are to come to Him as we are. He does the changing. He does the transformation, transforming us daily by the renewing of our minds. That's what happens. And yes, it's encouraged, very encouraged. And it's this death into life concept that I mentioned earlier. So it's all throughout. We are connected to the vine. We're connected to Christ. And in that, there's new growth. In fact, there's there should be fruits that come out of that he creates. We don't create it. It's not anything that we do. We don't plant the fruit and we don't harvest that. It's something he does in us. So the change comes internally, and this is true for me. The change comes internally, and then the things on the outside change. It's not the other way around. People using weight loss for an example, people can lose weight and then they gain it right back. They lose it, and then some time goes by, maybe for some, and they gain it all back. And I've done that too. I've lost weight several times, and not all of it, but I lost a lot, and then I'd get to a place where I was more comfortable, and then I'd ease up on it again because I didn't change what caused the problem in the first place, which was an internal thing. And then when that changed, then the change became real, and it was encouraged. We should all try to be connected so that we have growth. If we're not connected, then a lot of times we become stagnant and stuck. So that's my answer to that. Is anything off limits? Why don't you explain that? Is what off limits? Is there any kind of change that's off limits? Is that what you mean, Glenn?
Is there any kind of challenge that might come from somewhere else? I'll give you an example.
Sure.
And Jen was in chat in Messenger there. I think it might be about a week ago. Jen was just making the observation that maybe when you think you know what God wants for you, maybe it's not really what God's saying.
Right.
From an interpretive point of view. So that's where I was saying, is anything off limits? Is it acceptable that other people come to you and say, "Hey, hang on a minute, maybe what you think is not necessarily correct. Maybe there's an alternative."
Yeah.
And in general, are people prepared to accept that there may be alternatives to what you think? That's the off limits idea.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and I am learning something new. I'm surrounding myself with kind of like-minded people. Not that they agree. That doesn't mean they agree with everything that I say. I mean, that you're a good example of that, Glenn. You don't agree with everything I say. But we get along fine because we agree on more things than we disagree on, for the most part, or at least they're the essential things that we're able to agree on. But I take your advice seriously. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do everything that you suggest, but because I trust you, you're a person in my life that I have put some trust in. You have not betrayed my trust in any way. So if you see a situation I'm in, I'll come to you and say, hey, this is what's going on, and I'll listen to your opinion, and a lot of times I'll follow it. But either way, I have to be open to that, and I have to be available to listen. We had a whole show on listening, and it's active listening, and I do listen. So I have certain people, I think, around me that I can have kind of pour into that. And
Sorry. So does that mean in general that not necessarily you, but you should take this as general, that believers are willing to listen to non-believers and vice versa?
no.
Why not? Why not?
Well, believers, for the most part, I would say, and I'm not the spokesperson for all believers, but I would say that believers generally don't listen to unbelievers because they believe that they're missing something, and unbelievers would look at believers the same way and say that they're off their rockers to believe in some imaginary guy and out there somewhere that cares about their daily lives, especially looking at the condition of society as we know it and think that there's a God. I mean, they blame him for everything that happens, especially bad things. So they would yeah they would argue about that. Again, Glenn, this is a rare situation where a believer and a non-believer could find things in common. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be like this. It should absolutely be like this. It should be where people can get along regardless of their beliefs, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
Now, I just want to investigate what is the standard that from an off limits point of view, I mean, why do believers have this? Is it they're scared to ask non-believer, or they believe that the opinions of a non-believer are irrelevant and why bother? I'd love to know.
Yeah,
Just
me too. I'm not. I'm
yeah.
not.
Sorry, you go.
I'm not sure I have an answer to that. All I know is that from using your perspective, because you have a lot of things that are based on logic and things like that, and I like logic. I believe that a believer doesn't divorce from logic when they become a believer. That God puts logic into us to use, and we're to use that. We're to trust Him. But there are some things that are just common sense, and He gives that to us. Um, so as far as anything being off limits, there are certain unbelievers out there, angry atheists, to use as an example, that I wouldn't take anything from. Now, Matthias has a whole different perspective on this. He will set up a show with someone that has a completely different belief than he does. And he does that to get them into a dialogue where they can talk back and forth. Now, I would say that Matthias doesn't take anything they say and go with it and incorporate it into his life, because they're diametrically opposed on the topic of doctrine. So his show is called Talking Doctrine. That's what he likes to do, is talk to people about their doctrine. But it's not, the purpose isn't for both people to come away and take what the other person says and really, really listen and incorporate that into their lives. There's a hope, I think, each person has of changing the other person's opinion. Now, the only way it works for me, I'm not involved in my relationship with you, Glenn, because I think that I'm trying to change your opinion of something, and you're not trying to change mine. We come to an open, authentic relationship for other reasons, and things just naturally change. You've changed over the past 2 years as well. You've changed some of you have more understanding of some things that you didn't understand before. I'm not saying that you're ready to accept Christ in your heart, or in life or anything like that, but you have a better understanding of it than you would have before if you just had been closed off to the idea, if it was off limits for you to listen to a believer. So I've learned more too, though. See, I've learned in talking to you that there are things to be learned from at least having a conversation with someone that doesn't believe the same as you. But it's definitely not society at large. So I think that they should. I think that we should have these conversations. We should know what other people think and believe. Doesn't mean we're gonna fall into that. And I think that's some of the fear. Some of the fear is that if someone's faith isn't strong, then the fear is that if they talk to someone with a differing belief, that they're somehow going to be infected or somehow changed, which is patently ridiculous. You can have a conversation with someone, doesn't change anything. If my favorite color is purple, I talk to someone whose favorite color is red, and he's really serious about how much he loves red, and he has good points of why I should love red more than purple. It's not going to change because I love purple. I think that's a good point. So it doesn't hurt me to talk to someone that loves red. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't affect my love of purple. So I wish people were able to discuss more, even with different beliefs. But I don't think that's the rule. Is that what you see?
Well, what I do see is Hendrik says there's a sense of logic to believers' godly wisdom, but what may be wise.
Can you get closer to the mic?
Sorry, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying, Hendrik said there's a sense of logic to believers' godly wisdom, but what may be wise to us, to the world, it is foolishness. Not to sound too cliche. Well, I think that's the problem. Is there's this immediate expectation that non-believers are going to immediately say you're foolish because you believe. But what about if they actually do say, and a lot of them do, believe what you like? That's not for me to judge whether it's wise or foolish. Who cares?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, where are these people that don't believe in God that say it's fine that we do believe in God? Where are they? Is there like a chat room or something we can? I'm serious. I'm
I
serious.
wouldn't
You
know. I spend more time on these sites than I don't spend any time on any other looking for non-believers.
well, I know, but the point I'm making is that you think you said a lot. You just now said a lot of people are like you, and they're not.
Well, the
They're
people I know that don't believe really it doesn't have. Who cares? They just say, well, the real criteria by which they're going to want to speak with someone is what sort of person are you, not what do you believe.
right. But I believe that the people that you're referring to are people that you've chosen to be around, and you found them. I could make the argument that you refuse to hang around people that don't allow other people to believe what they believe.
Well, I'm not going to hang around bigots, whether they be religious or not.
That's my point. That's my point. So it's more a byproduct of what kind of people that Glenn decides to surround himself with.
That's a fair comment.
Okay. Now I'm in the same boat. I surround myself now where before I wouldn't have done this as much. I didn't even realize it was a thing. I had lots of, well, not lots, but I had a few people around me that were toxic, and it took me a long time to learn that just because I see the good in people, that it doesn't mean they're good for me. And that took some time. It took some stabs in the back, and it took some it took learning for me that the problem is that you find a stray dog and he has some good qualities, but they're they get kind of yippy sometimes and they'll bite you. Eventually, they are going to bite you. It might be the cutest dog in the world, but you have to consider how fresh the wounds are. How long that person has been in a particular situation. Mike Elder, the topic is we've come too far. Get lucky, but I know you didn't come in at the beginning, so there's a series of questions, and as you can see, we don't have a full panel tonight, so we're walking through this, making the best of it. So I'm sorry, there's not more of a defined topic, but this is what we're dealing with tonight, buddy. So thanks. Okay, so I think we agree that surrounding yourself with people, regardless of whether they believe the same or not. I like your topic about being a bigot. I don't choose to hang around that. Hendrix says, I don't even know the topic, and I've been here since the beginning. Okay, Hendrix, thanks. LOL. Thank you. Doesn't know what the topic is. There's several different topics wrapped into one, but the overall arching topic is that we're lucky. We're lucky that everyone listening to this show, there are advantages to your life. There are things in your life, regardless of what you're going through, that you have advantages and you have privileges. It's all about your perception, the way that you look at it. If you're looking at other people that seem to have more things than you, and you're saying, yeah, well, that's why my life sucks, is because I don't have what they have, then your perception might be a little skewed. Look at what you have. And this is something I'm willing to do too. And I've done this. Look at my own life and try to determine and be grateful for the things that you have. If you're grateful for the things that you have, then you're not ever going to be looking at someone else and thinking that they're more privileged than you. That's kind of the topic. And Cupcake Puppy says, Mike Elder, the topic is Weight Watchers. Yes, I have my points for the day. I did Weight Watchers once. Actually, I think it's the best system, at least the one that's been created. Probably one of the most successful ones because of the way the point system works. But that's neither here nor there, because that is not the topic for tonight. Okay, so not quite 11 o'clock. We almost made it the whole way, Glenn, but I think we're out of questions. I think we answered everything. The way that we ended the way that you ended the description says that's the hidden theme in tonight's show. What we think is real is often an illusion, and what we see as an illusion is often real. So, why don't you say a little bit more about that? To you, what is the illusion, Glenn?
I have to think about that. It sounded good when I wrote it.
Yeah. Oh, look.
Maybe that it's a societal thing. The things we place importance upon really are the things that to me are the least important, and the things we throw away are the things that are to my mind relevant. Probably the illusion of the fact of what's important.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. That's fine. Um, yeah, I see Matthias is here. We're
You're just finishing up. I know. I'm sorry.
He's not.
We had a little bit of chaos or confusion over dinner tonight, and we ended up going out to dinner. And then at 9:10, I was like, "Oh no, we gotta hurry! I'm an hour late." I had totally forgotten with the confusion here at the house that we were just worried about dinner. And actually went out, um, not expecting to go out to eat tonight. So
okay.
I do apologize.
That's all right. Yeah, Jen wasn't able to be here. Steve is at home with his family this weekend, so it was just Glenn and myself tonight. So we made the best of it since I already had put the link out before I realized that we would have such a small panel. So I even invited Esteban. Usually he's very willing to be part of a broadcast, but I didn't hear anything from him. I'm sure he's wrapped up with something anyway. So it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about that. It's very rare that this many people aren't able to be here. But Glenn and I just had a great discussion. Had a few people in the chat that had some good comments to make. So it was fun. Yeah. So since you're here, Matthias, we're going to kind of wrap it up. But having no idea of anything that we've talked about thus far, there's still a good question in the idea of what do you think is what we think is real is often illusion, and what we see as illusion is often real. Do you care to comment on that? No context.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, no context whatsoever there.
I mean, because ain't that the truth, though? Everything's this illusion. Man, ain't that the truth, though?
Yeah, totally.
Because, I mean, I remember when we had our first child, and we were going and getting all this help from different places for the free doctor's visits and milk and cheese with WIC and the baby formula, all the different things that the government, it seems like it's, great, it's good for you and waha. And then you look into it, it's like, wait, vaccines are terrible.
Yeah.
And they try to, it's all propping you up to where you'll get into this medical system with your kids at a young age and almost forced into it, because if they go to public school, they're going to have to deal with it. And so it seems like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But when you step back and really look at it, it's just hypnotizing people into the state-run system, which is actually further from health for your children.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great example, Matthias. You came in just at the right time to make that one excellent point that ties into the end of the show. So it was it was still worth it. It was still worth it. Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Awesome. Praise God.
Yeah, definitely praise God. So there's plenty of things that work out to be illusions in this world. For me, it was the idea of what I thought marriage was supposed to be, and I've already talked about that. I won't go into it, but what I thought friendships should be, and what the reality of friendships were, based on the kind of people I was choosing to be friends with, and what it is now is a completely different scenario. The the way that people say the Christian life should be is often an illusion. It doesn't match up with Scripture at all. The way that certain doctrines play out, it's not what the Bible is espousing. It's what man has espoused and believes. So there's plenty. The idea, I like what you touched on there. The illusion that the government cares about the individual JQ taxpayer at all is certainly an illusion. And, even as Matthias was saying, the ingredients of food and thinking that they're better for you it is an illusion as well. I think that we can all agree that there are illusions in the world, and the best thing to do is try to find out what's true and what's real and cling to that. And for believers, that is Christ crucified and resurrected and at the right hand of God. That to believers is the real thing, even though we live in a world where we don't physically see him or hear him audibly. We believe that's more real, that realm where he is more real than the realm that we live in. And to people that don't believe, that's absolute foolishness. But in the end, we'll see which was the illusion and which was the real thing. And that's not an attack. That's what we believe. We see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. So when we see Christ, when we will understand and we'll be able to see the full sight that comes from that, and we'll really understand all the illusions after the fact. But if you're living and breathing now and you're hearing this, then you can find out what's illusions in your own life. I mean, you can examine all your relationships and your marriage, if you're married, or your job, and you can find what the real things are, where the truth is, and embrace that. So any other comments with that before we close up? Glenn, you have anything to add?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we'll end it on the last sentence, which I think is a good way. So Glenn wrote, the bottom line is always the same. Whether you are a believer or not, at some point you realize luck, privilege, and success are irrelevant. That I don't think you could have ended it any better than that. Luck, privilege, and success are irrelevant, and absolutely they are. There's so many more things that are important in this life. And we've mentioned some of those things at least I did, in being compassionate, caring for others, building relationships that last, walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And we can all agree, at least the three members in this panel can agree on that point for sure. Even Matthias, without context, just agree, just verbalize your assent to that.
Because I trust you.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Oh, all right, guys.
But I did like that last sentence.
Okay.
It was awesome for sure, because luck, privilege, and success they mean nothing.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think luck plays a part in anything, to be honest. I think luck is a word to try to disguise God's blessings, even for those who don't believe in them.
Oh, well, yeah, that would have been a great point for you to make earlier on. When we asked the question.
Sorry, I didn't know the question was asked. But it's still... Go ahead, Glenn. I'm sorry.
Said JC nailed you.
Yeah. Well, he can take it. He can take it. Perfect. What were you going to say, Matthias?
Oh, I was just, that's so true. Like, privilege and success means nothing.
It is. All right. Thanks, guys. We're gonna say goodnight. And first of all, thanks to everyone in the chat, regardless of when you guys came in. Thank you for visiting. And since there's so few people, Thank you, Hendrix. Thank you, Alex. Of course, the real Alex, not the imposter. Galgotha, Cupcake Puppy. Thank you for coming. Journey's Wake. And Mike Elder, thank you for coming as well, my friend. And I'm just scrolling up. Just give me a second. Of course, Stacy Ann in Arizona. I don't want to miss anyone. Brenda Z, thank you for coming. DFX Daryl was in. I didn't see you, Daryl. I would have said hello to you, buddy, but thanks for stopping by. Patricia Randall, thank you for stopping. Celine was in here for a minute. Thank you, Celine. I appreciate you coming by as well. And I think that about covers it. So thank you guys for being a part of this very, very small panel. It's kind of a rare occasion. Journey's Wake. If I didn't say you, thanks for being here as well. Yeah, weird kind of panel, different broadcast than we normally have, but we showed up and did it anyway. I didn't know people weren't gonna be here, so sometimes we would have went ahead and canceled, but it was a little too close to the start time. So it is what it is. We will be back again next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another episode of True Story Live. And guys, just say goodnight. There's only the two of you, so just say goodnight, and then I'll wrap it up. Glenn?
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
And I'm sorry for being late. I will see you guys in this chat room next week for sure. But
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Matthias. Appreciate it. You are forgiven.
I already was.
I know. Yes. See, that's what. Okay, I'm just gonna stop right there. Nothing else. That's it. I'm choosing to stop right there. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Until next weekend. I hope the rest of your week, the week coming up, goes well. Until then, good night and God bless. Thanks for joining.